In November 1910, a private train quietly slipped out of Hoboken, New Jersey. On board were 7 men who controlled more wealth than most nations on Earth. They weren't headed to a conference, a hearing, or any government building. They were headed to a private island off the coast of Georgia, and they were going there to redesign the entire American financial system for 10 days. Behind locked doors and using fake names, these men drafted the blueprint for what would become the Federal Reserve. No reporters, no public oversight, no government committee, just a handful of bankers writing the laws that would eventually control the nation's money supply. 3 years later, on December 23, 1930, and while most of Congress had already left Washington for Christmas, the Federal Reserve Act quietly passed, and with one signature, the United States handed over the power to create money to a system designed by the very people it was supposed to regulate. To understand why these men had the leverage to reshape U.S. finance, you have to go back to the crisis that made it possible. The panic of 1907, when markets crashed and banks failed across the country. There was no central authority to stabilize anything. No lender of last resort. No emergency liquidity. The entire system was seconds from collapse until one man stepped in. J.P. Morgan. Morgan used his personal influence, his capital, and his network to stop the panic. And when the dust settled, one message became impossible to ignore. America needed a central bank, and the bankers wanted to be the ones running it. Senator Nelson Aldrich, deeply tied to both the Morgan and Rockefeller empires, was put in charge of studying banking reform, but the study was just a cover. What Aldrich really did was help organize a secret meeting. The meeting at Jekyll Island, where America's new monetary system would be designed. The men who arrived on that island represented the most powerful banking interests in the nation. Morgan, Rockefeller, National City, Kuhn-Loeb, trust companies, Wall Street royalty. Their combined wealth, in today's dollars, was in the tens of trillions. Enough to buy governments, and they knew it. For 10 days, they debated one question: how to build a central bank the public would accept, but the bankers would control. Their solutions were simple and brilliant. First, don't call it a central bank. Americans hated the idea, so call it the Federal Reserve System. Make it sound government-owned, even though it wouldn't be. Second, pretend it's decentralized. Create several regional reserve banks across the country, but structure everything so the New York Fed, the one tied to Wall Street, effectively runs the show. Third, let the government participate, but never truly control it. The banks themselves would own the Federal Reserve banks. They'd elect key directors. They'd control operations. The government would get the illusion of oversight. The bankers would get the power. And that's exactly how the Fed still works today. Here's the mechanism they created. The U.S. government spends more than it earns. Instead of raising taxes, it issues bonds. The Fed buys those bonds using money it simply creates out of nothing. That new money enters the economy through government spending. You pay taxes to cover the interest, and the banks that own the Fed earn guaranteed returns. In short, new money is created for the government. The cost is pushed onto the public, and the profits flow to the banking system. After the Fed was created, the timing couldn't have been better for the bankers. World War I began. The Fed expanded the money supply to fund the war effort. Bankers collected massive interest on government bonds, and America entered a new era of permanent debt and permanent inflation. The 1920s, bubble, the Great Depression, World War II, the 1971 end of the gold standard, the 2008 bailouts, the COVID money tsunami, every major financial turning point since 1913 has been shaped by the system designed at Jekyll Island. And over those 111 years, one statistic tells the whole story. The US dollar has lost more than 98% of its purchasing power. What cost $1 in 1913 costs over $30 today. Not because things got more expensive, but because the money became worth less. This isn't an accident. It's the design. The Fed targets annual inflation. That means your money loses value every year. while assets owned by banks and the wealthy rise. Today, a small group of private institutions still sits at the heart of America's money creation. They get the new money first. You get it last. They collect interest. You pay it. They get rescued. You tighten your budget. Everything goes back to that train in 1910, that island in Georgia, and those 7 men who quietly rewrote the rules of American money. Rules we all still living under today.